Most people misunderstand what awareness really is. They think it's just emotional sensitivity, kindness, or the ability to care deeply about others. But true awareness goes far beyond emotion. It's perception at a level most people never fully develop. It's the ability to notice what exists beneath the surface of human behavior. An empath doesn't simply hear words. They feel contradictions. They notice shifts in energy, tension in silence, hesitation in tone, and emotions hidden behind carefully constructed masks. And the difficult part is that this awareness doesn't turn off. It follows you everywhere. When you carry that kind of perception, people react to you differently even when you say very little. Not because you are trying to expose them, but because your presence naturally interrupts illusion. Most individuals spend years building emotional defenses to avoid confronting uncomfortable truths about themselves. They create identities based on appearance, control, and survival. They convince themselves they are fine even when internally they feel disconnected, insecure, or emotionally unresolved. Those patterns become part of how they function in the world. But an empath sees through those patterns instinctively. That is where the tension begins. Your awareness becomes a mirror people didn't ask to look into. And mirrors make people uncomfortable when they are avoiding themselves. Many people won't consciously understand why your presence unsettles them. They simply feel exposed around you. They sense that you notice more than they are showing. And instead of becoming curious about that feeling, they often become defensive. They may grow distant, sarcastic, dismissive, or strangely uncomfortable without any obvious reason. From your perspective, it feels confusing because there was no argument, no conflict, and no attack. But the trigger was never external. The trigger was internal. Empaths often make the mistake of blaming themselves for this reaction. They begin softening their personality, filtering their awareness, and shrinking their emotional presence just to make others comfortable. They try to become easier to handle. But hiding your perception does not create peace. It creates self-abandonment. The truth is, your awareness is not the problem. It simply reveals what already exists beneath the surface. And not everyone is prepared to confront that reality. Real awareness carries responsibility. It teaches you that your gift is not meant to control people or fix them. It is meant to help you recognize truth clearly, because light does not only illuminate beauty, it also exposes denial, insecurity, and emotional dishonesty. And some people resent the light not because it harms them, but because it reveals parts of themselves they are still trying to hide. Empaths often confuse emotional intensity with genuine connection, and that confusion can quietly drain them for years. In the beginning, it feels meaningful. Someone opens up to you, trusts you, and shares parts of themselves they rarely show to others. Because you naturally understand emotions on a deeper level, you listen carefully. You offer clarity, patience, reassurance, and support. You make people feel seen in ways they are not used to feeling. And for a while, that dynamic feels powerful, because helping others gives you a sense of purpose. But over time, something subtle begins to happen. The relationship slowly becomes unbalanced. You notice that you are always the one providing emotional stability. You become the person people run to when they are overwhelmed, confused, hurt, or emotionally lost. They rely on your calmness, your understanding, and your ability to process difficult emotions. At first, you accept this naturally because empathy is part of your nature. But eventually, you begin carrying emotional weight that was never meant to belong to you. This is why empaths attract emotional takers. People who are internally unstable are drawn toward emotional safety. And empaths create that safety without even trying. Your presence feels grounding. Your ability to listen without judgment makes others feel understood. But not everyone who is drawn to your energy is looking for growth. Some are simply looking for relief. They want comfort without accountability. They want emotional support without emotional responsibility. The more you give, the more normal it becomes for them to receive. What was once appreciated slowly becomes expected. Your emotional labor becomes invisible because they grow accustomed to your availability. And when you finally become exhausted, overwhelmed, or unavailable, the entire emotional tone changes. Suddenly they become distant, frustrated, or critical. Not because you did something wrong, but because the access they relied on has changed. That realization is painful for many empaths because they believed the connection was mutual. But there is a difference between being valued as a person and being valued for what you provide emotionally. Some people attach themselves to your energy because it helps regulate emotions they cannot regulate on their own. And once dependence forms, entitlement often follows. This is why boundaries become essential. Without boundaries, empathy turns into self-neglect. You begin overextending yourself, trying to maintain relationships that only function when you are constantly giving. But real connection requires reciprocity. It requires emotional effort from both people. Your role is not to become someone else's emotional life support system. The moment you stop measuring love by how much you sacrifice, you begin understanding the difference between connection and emotional consumption. And that awareness changes everything about the relationships you choose to keep. There comes a moment in every empath's life when exhaustion becomes impossible to ignore. Not physical exhaustion, but emotional exhaustion. The kind that slowly builds after years of constantly being available for others, constantly understanding, constantly carrying emotional weight that was never truly yours. At first, you don't notice how much energy you're giving away because helping people feels natural to you. You respond immediately when someone needs support. You make time even when you are tired. You absorb tension just to keep peace in relationships. But eventually, something inside you begins to shift. You realize that constantly sacrificing yourself is no longer sustainable. That realization changes the way you interact with people. You begin setting boundaries, quietly at first. You stop saying yes to everything automatically. You pause before responding to emotional demands. You stop over-explaining yourself just to avoid making others uncomfortable. And for the first time, you begin protecting your peace instead of constantly protecting everyone else's emotions. From your perspective, this change feels healthy. It feels necessary. It feels like balance finally entering your life. But for people who benefited from your lack of boundaries, it feels completely different. To them, your growth feels like loss of access, loss of emotional control, loss of convenience. And because they became comfortable with unlimited availability from you, even small boundaries can feel threatening to them. This is where many empaths become confused. People who once praised your kindness suddenly start questioning your behavior. They say things like, "You've changed," or "You're becoming distant." But what they are truly reacting to is not your lack of care. They are reacting to your new limits. Boundaries force people to take more responsibility for themselves, and not everyone is willing to do that. Some individuals would rather pressure you into returning to old patterns than adjust emotionally themselves. The difficult part is that empaths feel other people's discomfort deeply. When someone becomes upset because of your boundaries, your instinct is to fix the tension immediately. You want harmony restored. You want everyone to feel comfortable again. So you become tempted to soften your limits, apologize unnecessarily, or overextend yourself once more just to reduce conflict. But every time you abandon your boundaries to manage someone else's emotions, you teach them that your needs are flexible under pressure. And eventually, you begin teaching yourself the same thing. Real boundaries are not aggressive. They are consistent. They are the quiet decision to respect your own emotional limits, even when someone else dislikes them. Because healthy people may not always enjoy your boundaries, but they will respect them. The people who become angry, manipulative, or resentful are often the ones who benefited most from your self-neglect. And that is the deeper truth many empaths eventually learn. Boundaries do not destroy healthy relationships. They reveal unhealthy ones. Growth changes people quietly before it changes their life outwardly. At first, the shift is almost invisible. You begin noticing patterns you once ignored. Situations that once felt normal suddenly feel draining. Conversations that once held your attention now feel repetitive and emotionally heavy. As an empath, growth rarely happens all at once. It happens through accumulated experiences, through disappointment, emotional exhaustion, self-reflection, and awareness. Eventually, you reach a point where you can no longer pretend certain dynamics are healthy just because they are familiar. That awareness begins transforming the way you interact with others. You stop chasing connection at any cost. You stop feeling responsible for fixing every emotional problem around you. You become more selective with your time, your energy, and your emotional investment. From the inside, this feels grounding. It feels like clarity. But from the outside, especially to people who benefited from the older version of you, it can feel like distance. Your energy changes first. You no longer react immediately to emotional chaos. You no longer tolerate disrespect disguised as misunderstanding. You begin observing more and explaining less. And that difference becomes noticeable. People sense that your attention is no longer as easily available. They feel that your emotional boundaries are stronger. They recognize that your standards have changed, even if you never say it directly. For emotionally mature people, your growth can become inspiration. They admire the changes you've made. They respect your self-awareness and evolve alongside you. But not everyone responds that way. Some people experience your growth as silent pressure. because your evolution forces them to confront their own lack of growth. Your calmness reminds them of their emotional instability. Your boundaries remind them of their lack of discipline. Your self-respect reminds them of the ways they continue abandoning themselves. Instead of reflecting honestly, many people protect themselves through reinterpretation. They begin labeling your growth negatively so they don't have to understand it. Your peace becomes arrogance. Your emotional control becomes coldness. Your silence becomes judgment. These reactions are rarely about who you truly are. They are defense mechanisms designed to protect people from confronting the discomfort your growth creates inside them. This is where many empaths struggle emotionally. They try to maintain old relationships while becoming a completely new version of themselves internally. They minimize their growth to avoid making others uncomfortable. They revisit unhealthy patterns just to preserve connection. But growth and self-betrayal cannot exist together for long. Eventually, the emotional conflict becomes unbearable. Not every relationship is built to evolve with you. Some relationships survive only when you remain the same person. And when you outgrow that version of yourself, the connection naturally begins to weaken. That does not mean the growth was wrong. It means the relationship was connected to an older version of your identity. Real growth requires accepting that not everyone will understand your evolution. Some people will miss the version of you that had no boundaries, no standards, and no limits. But your responsibility is not to remain emotionally small just to maintain comfort for others. Your responsibility is to continue becoming more aligned with who you truly are, even if that growth changes the people around you. People often say they value honesty, but most people only value honesty when it feels comfortable. Real honesty is different. Real honesty disrupts illusion. It forces people to confront emotions, insecurities, and contradictions they usually avoid. And empaths naturally carry that kind of energy without even trying. Your awareness changes the emotional atmosphere around you because you notice things most people overlook. You sense emotional shifts before words are spoken. You recognize tension hidden behind smiles. You feel when someone's behavior and emotions are no longer aligned. And even when you stay silent, people can feel that awareness in your presence. That is why some individuals react defensively around empaths without fully understanding why. Your energy quietly removes emotional masks. It creates an uncomfortable sense of being seen too clearly. And for someone who has spent years avoiding parts of themselves, that experience can feel deeply unsettling. The strange part is that you may never say anything directly. You may simply observe quietly, listen carefully, or remain calm. But your awareness alone becomes enough to trigger internal discomfort in others. Emotionally mature people usually respond to that discomfort with reflection. They become curious about themselves. They ask questions internally. They use the experience as an opportunity for growth. But emotionally avoidant people often react differently. Instead of looking inward, they externalize the discomfort. They search for something outside themselves to blame. And the easiest target becomes the empath. This is why empaths are often misunderstood. People project emotions onto you that actually belong to themselves. They accuse you of overthinking, being too intense, too observant, too sensitive, or emotionally overwhelming. But many of those labels are not accurate descriptions of you. They are defensive reactions to the level of awareness your presence activates inside them. The difficult part is that empaths frequently internalize these reactions. You begin questioning your personality. You wonder if you should become quieter, less aware, less emotionally present just to make others comfortable. You try softening your truth so people won't feel exposed around you. But constantly minimizing your awareness slowly disconnects you from yourself. There is an important difference between being emotionally intelligent and becoming emotionally absorbent. Emotional intelligence allows you to understand people without losing your center. Emotional absorption causes you to carry emotions that were never yours to carry. And many empaths spend years confusing the two. Awareness itself is not the problem. The problem is that awareness naturally exposes emotional inconsistency. It highlights what people are avoiding within themselves. And not everyone is ready to face that level of honesty. Some people are more attached to emotional comfort than truth. They would rather protect illusion than confront reality. That is why your energy feels calming to some people and threatening to others. The same awareness that inspires growth in emotionally mature individuals creates resistance in those who are committed to avoidance. And once you understand that, you stop taking every negative reaction personally. You realize that not everyone is reacting to who you are. Many are reacting to what your presence silently reveals within them. At some point in an empath's life, a realization begins to form quietly beneath everything else. You start understanding that constantly giving your energy away is not the same thing as love. For years, many empaths believe their value comes from how much they can carry for others. They become the listener, the healer, the emotionally available person everyone depends on. They absorb tension to keep peace. They sacrifice rest to support others. They overextend themselves because they believe caring deeply means never letting people down. But eventually, the emotional cost of living that way becomes impossible to ignore. You begin noticing how drained you feel after certain interactions. You realize some relationships only function when you are endlessly patient, endlessly understanding, endlessly available. The moment you need space, rest, or emotional support yourself, the dynamic changes. Suddenly, people become distant, frustrated, or confused by your limits. And that's when the deeper truth becomes clear. Some individuals were connected to your availability more than they were connected to you. That awareness changes everything. You stop measuring your worth by how much pain you can tolerate. You stop believing self-sacrifice is proof of love. You begin understanding that empathy without boundaries eventually becomes self-destruction. And slowly, you start protecting your energy differently. Protecting your light does not mean becoming cold or emotionally disconnected. It means becoming intentional. It means recognizing that your emotional energy is valuable and should not be available to everyone without limits. You become more careful about where your attention goes. You stop explaining yourself endlessly just to avoid disappointing people. You stop abandoning your own needs to maintain emotional harmony for others. At first, this shift feels uncomfortable because empaths are deeply sensitive to how people react. When someone becomes upset by your boundaries, your instinct is to fix the discomfort immediately. You want everyone to feel understood. You want peace restored. But real peace cannot exist when it requires constant self-abandonment. Eventually, you realize that protecting other people's comfort at the expense of your own well-being is not compassion. It is imbalance. And as your self-respect grows, your entire energy begins to change. You become calmer because you are no longer carrying emotions that don't belong to you. You become clearer because your intuition is no longer buried beneath exhaustion. You become stronger because your identity is no longer dependent on being endlessly needed. Not everyone will stay comfortable with this version of you. Some people were attached to the version of you that had no limits, no standards, and no boundaries. But the people who truly value you will not require you to shrink yourself in order to keep the relationship intact. They will respect your growth instead of resisting it. Your sensitivity was never weakness. Your awareness was never a flaw. Your boundaries are not selfish, and your growth is not something you should apologize for. Protecting your light means finally understanding that your empathy was never meant to destroy you in the process of saving everyone else.